We've all wanted a time machine at some point. Maybe to undo that embarrassing karaoke performance, or maybe to see if the viral video of that embarrassing karaoke performance is still being shared everywhere online in 10 years. But you can't have any redos, at least yet. And until we can, I suggest that you sit back and enjoy my recommendations for another 10 time-bending books. You won't regret it, at least I hope. First up is The Rise and Fall of Dodo. In this book, basically asks the question, what if time travel was powered by magic? The book follows a linguist named Melisande Stokes, who's recruited by this mysterious military organization called Dodo, which stands for the Department of Diachronic Operations. And she's been recruited to help harness the lost art of magic in order to alter history. Mel and the team at Dodo realized magic once existed but vanished due to the invention of photography, which weakened its power. So yeah, people used to apparently in this book have actual magical powers, but now they don't because of the camera. And pretty soon, wouldn't you know it, the characters' time-bending missions get really complicated and end up threatening not just the Dodo agency, but the entire world, basically. If you want a dense, thought-provoking book that has this crazy mishmash of witches, Vikings, bureaucracy, and history, this is the magical time travel book that you never knew you needed. Next up is Here and Now and Then, and this is kind of about what would happen to the brain if you were able to travel into the past. Would you be able to actually function still? Who knows? But like I said, the book here is looking at what happens if you get stranded in the past. Would your mind just kind of turn to jelly? Would you remember having these family and friends that are no longer in your current time period? So the book focuses on Ken Stewart, that's the main character, and he's this time-traveling kind of secret agent from the year 2142, I think, who stops bad guys from messing with the past. But one of his missions goes wrong, leaving him stranded, like I said, in the 1990s. And even though there are protocols in place that he's supposed to follow in order to not influence the past and obviously make the future something different than it's supposed to be, he eventually just kind of has to move on with his life because he isn't rescued after a while. And so he does move on with his life until this extraction team that was supposed to come for him shows up, but they show up 18 years later. But Ken has a wife and daughter by that point, and this extraction team tells him, and Ken knows that he's not supposed to tell his wife and daughter anything about this time travel secret agent stuff. And so he's pretty much just kind of forced to abandon them. It's really brutal, but he has to abandon them and go back to the future. And after all that time living in the past, his brain is kind of torn in two, meaning he can't really remember the loved ones from his life in 2142 when he shows back up there. And this time travel story is really relevant and really good if you're a parent, especially, since Ken has to, after he gets back in 2142, reach out to his daughter somewhere, somehow, some way into the past. He's reaching back and trying to make sure that her life isn't completely ruined since he had to just leave her. He had to up and leave her without even really saying goodbye. Third on my list is The Frozen People, and this is a solid time travel mystery novel that jumps from the present to 1850s London, as Allie Dawson, who's the main character, is a kind of similar to the last one, a time-traveling cold case detective. And she's trying to solve this bizarre murder that happened back in the 1850s. And like I said, Allie's part of this small secret group who collects evidence from the past in order to solve past crimes. But this is really the first case where she's more than just a ghost. Usually they're just kind of ghost-like. They can't interact with the people in the past. But this time in 1850s London, she's flesh and blood. She can talk to people. People can see her, all that stuff. And so now she's interacting with these Victorian-era Englishmen and women, and she's desperately trying to fit in and not stick out as she observes and interviews witnesses and trying to piece together what actually happened for this murder. Adding some tension are two other items. One, she might actually be stuck back in time forever and ever, amen. And two, her son is on the hook for a different crime in the future, in Allie's usual present, which is actually tied together with the murder that happened in the 1850s. Even I, a non-mystery reader, enjoyed this book because it had a good amount of time-traveling detail to it. So you might too. Up next is A World Out of Time. And yes, this is one book, but it really could have been stretched out into a trilogy, I think. But I appreciate that Larry Niven mashed several different ideas into this single story. The main character is Corbell, and he's an Earthman who's frozen back in the 20th century, then reanimated 200 years later. I divide this story, if I could, into 3 sections. 1, Corbell has an adventure in space and time with a computer. 2, he arrives on a planet, and 3, he has this neat mission and interaction with the locals on that planet as he's trying to survive. It's on the lighter side of hard sci-fi as it kind of skims the surface of each one of these segments of the story, meaning Corbell's road trip through the universe, his political musings, and these planet exploration episodes. None of them really last all that long, which I appreciate because it's a trap that a lot of chunky science fiction books fall into. So you get a focused, interesting section that builds the story and then moves on to the next focused and interesting section. And there's plenty of variety too, so you don't have to worry about it feeling boring or mundane. It just keeps building and building. And really, that's why it feels like a long Star Trek episode, where you quickly wrap your head around the character, his predicament, the world that he's suddenly thrust into, and then you get to the meat of the story. At number 5 on my list is Enchantment, and this is a standalone novel that's actually a retelling of Sleeping Beauty with a Russian twist. Not only that, but it features time travel, obviously, and Baba Yaga. And in this one, Ivan is the main character, and he's a scholar of Russian folklore who discovers a sleeping princess in the woods. That'll happen. It's a classic fairy tale situation. However, when he wakes up the princess Katerina, he's transported back in time to ancient Russia, where he finds himself in a battle against the evil witch I talked about, Baba Yaga. It's got charm, magic, humor, and heart, plus some fun with past and present things, letting Ivan, I never know which one to say. Ivan, I guess, and Katerina really learn from each other's worlds. And I will say that this is kind of a palate-cleansing fantasy book. It's not too deep. It's, on the slow side. It's on the easy-to-read, cheesy side. So it's kind of a guilty pleasure read, but still great nonetheless. Up next is a fast-paced, time-jumping, and body-hopping novel called Flight. And the main character in this one is Zitz, who's an angry, half Native American teen in the foster care system, who doesn't really feel like he belongs anywhere. And this anger that he feels towards pretty much everyone leads him down a really dangerous road, eventually leading to this mysterious time-traveling adventure that he happens to wind up in. But what's kind of cool about this one is that he's not traveling into his own past. He's transported into the bodies. Like I said, he's body hopping. He's in various people throughout history, including there's an FBI agent during Native American uprisings. I think there's also a soldier at Little Bighorn and a few others in his own personal timeline that are really cool. And what's neat is that this body jumping really lets Zitz look at race from a few different angles. He gets to meet personal and cultural heroes, and he gets a taste for a life or lives that he's always wanted. But he also comes face to face with betrayals by some of his best friends, by his parents, and then he also gets to see some of the real harsh consequences of violence. And the author of this, Sherman Alexie, has this raw but still kind of playful writing style. It's extremely unique, especially for a time travel book that's all about, it's about healing, it's about growth and trying to break these cycles that plague us all in society. 7th on my list is The Door into Summer, which stars Dan Davis, who's this brilliant engineer who just finds himself betrayed by business partners. He's heartbroken and left with only a cat and this urge to start over. So in this sad state, being really, really heartbroken, he goes into cryosleep for 30 years. And when he wakes up, he follows some breadcrumbs that slowly lead him to a scientist who's invented time travel but never really used it. So after he kind of smooth talks the scientist a little bit, kind of pushes some of his buttons, pretty soon Dan's right back in his original time, and he gets to start righting past wrongs and making sure his romantic interests are legal, because this one has some kind of questionable gray areas there. So yeah, that part's weird, but at least he time hops to make them an age-appropriate couple for the book. Read it and you'll see what I mean. And take this for what it's worth, but this isn't normal Heinlein. It's a breezy, almost whimsical romp that still has classic ideas by him about technology and human nature scattered throughout, but it's different. Next on my list is A Ripple in Time, where a plane full of passengers goes through this strange cloud over North Carolina that transports them back to the same spot in the 1700s. And now the survivors have to figure out how to live and fit in colonial times. So this book feels somewhat realistic in how the characters think through their position, but you'll have to suspend reality a bit because it isn't 100% accurate to how people in the past would have reacted to weird new strangers in their town. But when the main character, Stephen Mason, has this separate brush with jumping into the future, he then has to figure out how to get back to everyone he left back in the 18th century, while he's also kind of tracking what happened to them. He can now, in the future, look back and see, okay, did they survive? Did they live? Did they thrive? Did they have good lives? It's a pretty straightforward, step-by-step guidebook on how to survive in the past, which of course I like, but there's also just enough wrinkles to keep things interesting. Ninth on my list is The Guardians of Time, and this is a collection of short stories revolving around the main character, Manson Everard, who becomes a member of the Time Patrol. Everard's job is to make sure no one is messing with past events, something that's kind of been touched on already in some of these books, and he's also making sure that paradoxes don't happen at all costs. He has to make sure that he gets rid of those, and he has to fix those issues if he can. With several different eras and stories explored with these alt histories, there's something for everyone in here, but it also means that you may love one section and may not be a huge fan of the next one. I really like Powell Anderson's writing, and the unique part about these stories is that he's okay, the Time Patrol anyway, the Time Patrol in this book, they're okay with time being kind of flexible, meaning that like small changes are okay by them. If something small changes in history, okay, they're gonna shrug their shoulders at it. But big changes are a no-no. Those are the ones they're gonna go back and try and fix. So this gives Everard, the main character, some options with how he wants to try and solve these time crimes. And last on my list is The Gone World, which is a time travel mystery thriller featuring Shannon Moss, an agent, yes, for another secret time travel project that this one only lets you jump forward in time from your present time. But each future for each person is just a possible future, and it ends at a certain point. You can't go beyond that future at a certain point. But those future endings are just creeping closer and closer and closer to the present. Then some murders happen that are kind of associated with this secret project, and Shannon is tasked with investigating this whodunit mystery. It may sound really complicated, and yeah, it kind of is, but it's also explained well in the book, so your head's not spinning. And like I've said before, I'm not a mystery man at all, so for me to be recommending any mystery books really says something, especially about how well the time travel aspect was done in this one. There you have it, 10 more lesser known time travel books that I've read and enjoyed, and I hope you will too. Let me know in the comments what the next time travel book should be that I read, and of course don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy reading.